Hi.
Hi.
Today is January 16th, 2025. I'm Hestia Haske, spelled Hestia Haske. Can you please introduce yourself for the recording? Your name, how it's spelled, occupation, how long you've lived in Cville, and how you identify.
So my name is Catherine Gillespie, and that's CathereneGillespie. Let's see, I've been in Charlottesville. How I identify as lesbian.
Mm-hmm.
How long I've been in Charlottesville? I moved here in 1997. It might have been 96. And occupation, my most recent work was I was a college counselor at Tandem Friends School, and I did that for about 14 years. Prior to that, I was at the University of Virginia, and I did career counseling as well as pre-medical advising and pre-law advising. I'm a social worker by training, so I've done lots of different things, but those two are the longest standing jobs I had in Charlottesville.
Great. So I guess I'm just going to start with, an overview of how have you experienced the queer community in Charlottesville?
So I came to Charlottesville in the late mid-90s because my wife was here already, attending the University of Virginia Law School. We had dated for about a year. I was down in Richmond at VCU and getting my master's in social work. And I came to Charlottesville all the time. Mm-hmm. Now, Richmond had a really vital gay community that I was a part of, with the bookstore and the clubs and the dancing and, restaurants. I'm not a city girl. Mm-hmm. I grew up in the country, and so Charlottesville seemed like this beautiful in-between kind of place where things were more relaxed and laid back. The gay community wasn't as active and visible as it was in Richmond, but I didn't necessarily need it to be because I was with Andre, Andrehakes. That's my wife's name. And so she introduced me to a lot of her gay friends that she already had in the community, that she knew through the University of Virginia, which she had gone to as an undergraduate as well. So we kind of made our own little group, and it wasn't, I don't know if it was that, there were maybe a dozen of us. We got together to watch The X-Files, which was still running at the time, which dates me. We got together to drive all the way down to Richmond to go dancing and get dinner at Babes, which I think Babes is still running in Richmond too, Babes. I'm not sure about that. It's been a really long time. Anyway, we would close them out. We would dance until they closed at 2 o'clock in the morning, or was it 3? And then we'd drive back and get breakfast at Denny's and then crash when we came back to Charlottesville with the sun coming up. And so I don't do those things anymore because that was a good thing to do in my 20s. So what my gay community looked like when I first got here was that, an established group of graduate students who knew one another and did things together, but it wasn't a broad community. It was very, very singular to my wife's social community. And we would go dancing at Club 216.
216.
Yeah. So 216.
Yep.
But I don't know. It was that was a members only club. You had to pay a membership fee to be a part of it, and there was a reason for that. That you could serve alcohol past when bars had to close. But we were poor graduate students, and having membership someplace wasn't. It wasn't in our budget. Ramen noodles were in our budget.
Yeah.
So let's see. How did things evolve? I think it stayed like that for me for the first couple of years that I was here, and it was absolutely fine. But then what happens with graduate student communities is people leave. They get jobs elsewhere. They head off to Madison, Wisconsin. They go off to Seattle. And anyway, New York. They went and all 4 winds. And so we found ourselves like, oh, it's kind of just us now. So we did seek out more established members in the community, and there was a listserv. You even know what a listserv is? It's an email group. It's kind of like being a part of a chat group on your phone.
I see.
But it was an email group, and again, my wife could tell you the name. There was a woman who was beautiful. She did the work, layman's work of people would send her, oh, these are activities that are going on. There's this dinner, or there's this event, or there's this speaker over at UVA, and she would once a week send out an email. It might have been once a month. There wasn't that much going on. Saying these are the things that the community might want to know about. And it was a total word of mouth thing. You got on the listserv because you knew somebody who knew there was a listserv. And you wrote on her, Laurie, Laurie, and I'm not going to remember her last name. I can maybe follow up with you on that. So there was that.
Do you remember what did the email, did it have a name, or was it just?
I think it was I'm sure it had LGBT in
something.
it. LGBT community or something like that. Again, my wife could probably tell you. Audrey, my wife, started doing these once a year Valentine's Day dinners.
Oh, that's fun.
And they were called Share the Love. And what it was about was you could go out to dinner with your honey in Charlottesville and not draw a lot of attention most nights. There's a strong enough gay community. It's not an uncommon thing to see two men or two women having dinner together. But you drew attention if you went out to dinner on Valentine's Day. So we knew a lot of people at that point who wouldn't go out on Valentine's Day, and like, that's what I want to do.
Right.
I want to go out to a nice dinner for Valentine's Day. But I knew, and we did, even in Charlottesville, draw attention. And I'm not really big on attention, which may come in later as kind of funny, because I think the universe has a sense of humor. Andre and I were the first women to get married in this, so we got a lot of attention. But so anyway, so Andre started these Share the Love dinners, and she had a group of people who worked with her on that. So that was kind of an organized group that did this thing, and they were fundraisers. You wanted to keep it. I remember we tried so hard. Like, okay, you have to pay for the dinner. Like, we have to have enough money to for the restaurant to make it worth it. But you want to make sure that it's accessible to people, right? Because we remembered being graduate students and not being able to do things. So you want to keep the costs down. So then you work with the restaurant on the menu, and you like try to make it good, but not so good that it's out of the range of people. And then you wanted to do something nice on top of it. So at the tables, we would ask people if you are interested in giving towards Shelter for Help in Emergency was one of the organizations that we gave money to. And it was a specific decision to give it to organizations that were not necessarily LGBT, because it was about building community, building networks, and letting folks know as members of this community, we want to look out for the whole community, right? So that went on for years. So there was the listserv, there was the Share the Love dinners, and oh my God, can I just tell you, it was so cool. The very first dinner we had, the restaurant doesn't exist anymore, but the very first dinner we had, these two men stood up. There was a place for sharing at the end, if you had thoughts. Anyway, these two men stood up, and they were in their 70s, I think, and they had never in their lives
been at a public,
gone out to dinner on Valentine's Day. And just, we were all teary because we all knew what it was to like hide yourself.
That is incredible.
And so here were these men who had this beautiful relationship, and they could celebrate it. Not just go out to dinner, but celebrate it with all these other gay folks in town who wanted to celebrate it with them. Oh my God, it was awesome.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. There would be, there was a parade where, oh God, which parade was it? Was it the Christmas parade? There was a parade, again, Andre could tell you. And Andre would want to make sure that the gay community was represented.
Yeah.
And so the Share the Love people and the listserv people would get to and have a float.
That's amazing.
And Andre she's loved trucks, and she always had a nice truck to tow something behind. And it was never really a lot, but a presence,
Yeah.
I remember one year we had these two gay flags flying in this huge red truck, and we had all of the gay anthems were pumping from the speakers that she had mounted in the back, and just you just drove around downtown. It was just this little loop around downtown, and to see members by then the gay community had been out a bit more. people who loved the music,
Yeah.
who weren't part of the gay community, but saw that that's cheering along with us. Again, being part of the overall Charlottesville community, it felt so good, even though I'm sitting there in that truck and thinking, I don't like attention. It felt good.
Yeah.
So there was the listserv, there were the dinners.
Do you know roughly when that
those
started? And
I would
continued
say
through?
mid 90s, the listserv was in full swing, mid to late 90s. And then the Share the Love dinners, I think, were early aughts, and they went on for quite a while. And that was really neat, too, because the people who came together to do that weren't necessarily all members of the gay community, but like parents of gay kids.
Yeah.
Or, there's this one woman who, she was a politician and she helped raise money for lots of people, and she had moved here from California, so she was way into, of course, the gay community, right? And she was instrumental in making money show up for these events to happen, because if you got sponsorships, right,
that's really important.
then you can lower the cost for the people coming in. But Andre was just a powerhouse in making those things happen. The other thing that we did, God, when did this start happening? So we adopted a kid from Vietnam, and that was in 2006. And I remember Andre saying to me, "You're gonna adopt a child?" She's like, "But we're gay, and it's Virginia." And I said to her, and I'm laughing for a reason, I said to her, "It's 2005. It's not like they're going to come after us."
Yeah.
Guess what? They came after us.
Yeah.
And when they did, it was terrifying. Adoption laws are really strong laws about, look, once you've adopted the child, then that's your child. But Virginia had a pretty not great history of gay moms. There's the Sharon Bottoms case, SHARRON BOTTOMS, where Virginia took away her child because she was gay.
Right.
I mean, just that's the only reason that was given.
Yeah.
And
I think I have heard of that case.
it was awful. It happened before I was in grad school, and I remember drawing it. So here I am in Richmond, urban, School of Social Work. You'd figure pretty liberal. A lot of people went to schools of social work to do good in the world who'd come from religious backgrounds. So there was this moment where we were supposed to share social justice related stories. And I stood up and I shared this Sharon Bottoms story, and I'm like reading from my notes. I look up at the end, and the whole tenor of the room had changed. And I looked and I'm like, oh, I'm not among friends. And it was my first moment of recognizing that my community in social work, that it was not a safe place necessarily, because they had agreed with the Sharon Bottoms decision. Wow, that was awful. So I was like, okay, well, it's good to know. It's good to know where I am. So anyway, when they came after us around our adoption, and I can tell you more details about that if you want, Andre and I had very different reactions to that happening. We eventually won in court, getting them to dismiss, not necessarily getting them to say we had the right, but we basically beat the challenge to our adoption. And it took thousands of dollars and hours of, there was donated work in the end by some really good friends, but it was terrifying. We cried every night. The idea that they could take her. I mean, I had brought this child all the way over from Vietnam. I'm his mother now. I'm responsible for his life. And they're threatening to take him away from me. And I wasn't worried about me, I was worried about him.
Yeah.
Like, he's already lost so much, and now he's been with us for 1.5 years, 2 years, and now you're going to take him. No, like I was ready to flee the country to make that not happen.
Right.
So anyway, once we won, the two directions Andre and I went. Andre was her response to fear is anger and action, and get out there and make it a safer place.
Right.
Yay for her. And my reaction was lay low, keep my child close to me, and not draw too much attention, because attention can get us in trouble.
Yeah.
So we did both things.
It's difficult to do both.
Yeah, she did that, and I did I'm going to be here with my child. So at that point, when the parades would happen, I'd be like, yeah, Mason and I are going to be home. Mason, M-A-S-O-N. You have fun. And she started going to the clerk's office, and actually I would do this with her, but not with Mason in tow. The county clerk is the one who issues marriage licenses.
Yeah.
So the first year I didn't go with her. She went to go publicly ask for a marriage license. And like she had people go with her from the gay community to do it. The press was there the first year she did it. The guy who was the clerk at the time, he's like, oh no, it was the sheriff. Andre told the sheriff who she was friends with, like, this is happening. It's not going to be a big deal, but just wanted to let you know this is happening. And the sheriff asked, should we call the National Guard? Andre's like, it's completely peaceful. We're bringing chocolates in a big Valentine box. It's going to be fine. And it was, so she went in, she gave the chocolates to the clerk and the people who worked in the clerk's office, and she asked for the license, and he denied it, like publicly right there. No, unfortunately, no, he didn't even say unfortunately. He's like, by this law of the state, I can't offer you one.
Right.
The very next year, the current clerk, who was a friend of ours, and I can't remember the name. So anyway, the next year we went, and she was very much on our side. So we came with our chocolates and our support people and flags, and we asked, and she was the one who said, unfortunately, by state law, I can't. But the minute that I can, I will.
Yeah.
And so that was beautiful. We loved it. And every year we'd go, and had this experience, and it put us in the press. It put it in front of the public, and it put it in a way that was, this is who we are. We're still here. We're still together, and we're still asking, and still bringing chocolates and walking away politely when we don't. But I think we raised awareness in the community around it, and so the fact that we're the first ones to get married, it was because Duggar, Lizelle Duggar, Luzelle Dugger. When it happened that the law was passed and we were able to get married, Andre called me at work. I was too busy to know that it happened, but her phone started ringing off the hook. So we rushed down, and it wasn't approved just yet for the Virginia piece. They had one more, so we're sitting around waiting. Literally, the second that it came through, our guy was on the phone with them. It's gone through? Yes. So we start the paperwork and get ourselves married. And I think at that point, so much had changed. I should go back. I've gotten off track. We go out front of the courthouse, and there are people there with champagne that they've brought and flowers that they've brought, and we're celebrating together. People are driving by honking their horns in celebration, and there was just so much joy that this had happened. We had always thought we would have our own wedding later. Like, we'll get married by the clerk, but then we'll have our own wedding later. We decided not to, because we couldn't imagine anything more perfect. In the interim, between the time that they came after us with our son and the time that we got married on the court steps, a lot had changed in the gay community here in Charlottesville in the interim. Amy Marshall, A-M-Y, and you should talk to her, M-A-R-S-H-A-L-L, Amy Marshall, moved to the area, and I'm not going to be able to date it because that's a blurry time for me. But when she came in to the community, she's like, okay, how do I get connected to the gay community? And she saw that there were these different things going on, and there was the listserv, but there was no gay pride event. I wonder if by then, 216, I think by then 216 didn't even exist by then. And so she's like, there needs to be a more visible, centralized way of bringing the gay community together in Charlottesville. And she did. I think initially people were like, yeah, we're kind of good with how things are. As people tend to do. She's like, no, we can do so much more. So she brought a vision for bringing people together, and she helped make Cville Pride happen in Charlottesville. Maybe it would have happened eventually without her, but she's critical to having that happen. And she created a board that worked tirelessly around these issues. She got a website up of these are the things going on. I think she got a family group going together because she had kids. I never had the opportunity to really be a part of it, but there was like LGBT family group, and there were I don't know if there were book clubs, but she could tell you more about all the things. And if you go now to Cville Pride, you'll see that they're still doing their thing. I don't think she works with them anymore. I think she stepped away from it. I think she'd probably be willing to talk to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
But she could do, that's a huge piece of the history.
Yeah.
Cville Pride.
Cville Pride
Getting
started.
that up and running.
Yeah.
And having it be so successful.
Yeah.
I mean, initially, when it was put together, I think we were, how many people will show up? We've got all these vendors, but will people actually show? Oh my God, they showed. And they showed from the university, and they showed from the community, and they came from surrounding areas because, Harrisonburg doesn't have a gay pride event, right? Lynchburg doesn't have a gay pride event, so people were coming from other communities to be a part of it. So yeah, that's a big piece. And now I feel like, I think Andrea and I both, our son started college last semester. So we successfully raised him past the age of 18, so they can't mess with us anymore. Which felt like that was a goal.
Yeah.
Like, let's get to 18. Then he's his own person.
Yeah.
And I think both of us now, when we see community stuff going on, I think we both are like, God, it's so good that there are younger people who've come along and picked it up, because we used to be very active.
Yeah.
And now we're kind of, I feel like I've retired from work at Tandem, and I feel like we're not as involved with the gay community as we used to be, which probably will change now that Mason's back in college.
Right.
Back in college, now that Mason's off to college. So who knows? We'll see what happens for us next. But we feel like Charlottesville, just as a general statement, even back in the 90s when I first came here, even without a centralized gay community experience, it felt safe to be here. Partly because of the university, and partly, I mean, it's just a blue dot, and at the time, a very red state, which has changed. But it always felt just okay, right? And then it's only gotten more okay over time.
Okay.
That was a very long answer to one question.
That's amazing. I just wanted to go back and ask about some dates. Do you know when you started going to the circuit court?
We have newspaper articles at home about it that I could give you a more specific date and follow up with you. How about that?
That's perfect.
Cool.
And then, was it successful in 2016?
2014.
14. Oh, wow.
2014, yeah. So get this. Andrea and I, we celebrate 2 anniversaries. They're very close together. We celebrate, just this last year, we celebrated 10 years together in marriage, official. And this coming fall, so that's that date, I think, is October 22nd, 2014, I think is that date. Obviously don't quote me on that, but of course you are. And then
You can change it.
Yeah. Our personal anniversary we celebrate on October 15th. And that one, this coming year, 30 years.
Wow.
I know. I'm
That's
like,
amazing.
how can I be that old? But I am.
Yeah.
We like to say we were babies when we got together. So.
Roughly what year was Cville Pride getting started?
That's a great question. I would have to say maybe 2008, somewhere around in there. 2000. Boy, Hestia, I am so sorry. As a historian, I would fail miserably, I think.
The good thing about this kind of project is that we get a ton of people to all give it, and hopefully someone
collectively will have the knowledge.
We'll have the knowledge, and we have enough that anyone who's off by a couple months or something,
or a couple years,
can
correct,
be corrected. Yeah. And I'm sure there's newspapers around that can.
I wonder if how old the internet history is on it. I mean, I wonder if you Googled Cville Pride dates. Who knows? Anyway,
I am not 100% sure. I know that there was an article in the Cville Weekly at some point celebrating an early Cville Pride. I don't know if it was the first one.
What year? Do you remember what year that was?
I don't, not off the top of my head. But
it's okay.
I'm sure.
We'll figure it out.
I'm sure it can be
it's
found
in there.
easily. Yeah.
Are there other things I can help clarify?
Let me
try. Try to help clarify.
let's see. You went over a lot of the specific questions I had. Yeah, I guess I would be interested in hearing about how, like, you said that Charlottesville has never really been a place to be scared to be out.
You want me to say more about that?
Yeah, sure. Like, did that change over time?
Yes, I've gotten. So first to say, I am an extremely sensitive human being. So I do think of it as a universal joke that I get to now. Well, when I figured out I was gay, I was like, no.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's good. It's an opportunity for growth.
Yeah.
So suddenly I'm inviting, like I always wanted approval, right? And I guess it's helped me figure out that that's not all that important. You know, that there are much more important things than that. So being highly sensitive to needing approval, figuring out you're gay, and being out. I mean, Andre was not the first person I dated, but very close to it, because I figured out fairly early on I need to be with someone who is comfortable being who they are. Right. Because I have to get there, right? And so there can't be two of us in this relationship who are working on that. And Andre, she had figured out she was gay when she was in high school, before she went off to college. And she was in a much more unsafe place. She was in Bristol, Virginia at the time. In the 80s, Bristol, Virginia in the 80s was not a great time to be out and gay.
I see.
And so she had to work through all of that stuff pretty quickly. And when I met her, I was like, oh, she can maneuver this. She's a strong enough person to maneuver this. So we would walk on the downtown mall, and I kind of knew, like, I present as very femme. She presents as somewhat butch. And, like, people are going to kind of, if they pay half attention to us, we're going to figure out that we're, but I didn't feel comfortable holding her hand.
Right.
And honestly, I don't know that I still do, but I think that's more historical for me. Like, we've now been together this long, and we've not walked down the downtown mall holding hands. So it doesn't feel unusual to me to do that. But I remember initially when we dated, I should give you my personal history. My own dating experience had been with guys in high school and college. And so my norms for a relationship would be to walk down the mall holding hands. That would have been my norm. But now I'm in a gay relationship. Even being in Charlottesville, I was not necessarily comfortable doing that.
Right.
And so how did I manage that? Well, I managed it by not necessarily holding hands, even though I knew we could get pegged. How do we clocked? Was the word we used to use.
Yeah.
So what I did was and I still do this, I have this bubble that I live in that is, my awareness is focused on me and the person that I'm with.
Right.
I have periphery awareness of where we are. That can be turned on a dime if things get scary, right? So they've never gotten scary for us in Charlottesville, I should say that, but I still do that. Yeah. And I don't necessarily, how would I put it? I don't necessarily think of Charlottesville as safe. I think of it as safer than a lot of the places around it. How does that
makes sense.
ring a little more true? Yeah. I mean, I told you I'm not a city girl. I have family down in Smithville, Virginia, which is about 2.5 hours drive away. It's Norfolk, Virginia Beach. It's a rural community near there. So I didn't feel comfortable leaving Virginia. I wanted to be around my family close enough that I could be there. And I thought, in Virginia, where would I feel comfortable being who I am? And I thought, Richmond, I could do it within my own community. Charlottesville, I could do it. And Northern Virginia, which I couldn't do. Because again, both Northern Virginia and Richmond felt too urban for me. And Charlottesville just fit my way of being in the world, you know? Like a little slower pace, a little more, I don't know, Southern friendliness? Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I guess suburban-ish.
Yeah, a certain kind of congeniality that people experience in the grocery store. You know, people wouldn't necessarily think I was weird if I struck up a conversation with them in the grocery store line. Right. Whereas in Richmond or Northern Virginia, they might. So this was a much better fit. Yeah. I'm trying to think if I ever have felt scared in Charlottesville. When I think about that question, for me, it's sometimes we would forget. We lived out in Barborsville for a while when we bought our home. So Barborsville, which is about a 30-minute drive out of town. It's in Orange County. That's what we could afford when we bought our first home in 1999. We could either afford a postage stamp house and a postage stamp yard here in Charlottesville that needed work, like a fixer-upper, or we could buy something that didn't need fixing up that was nice further out. And so that's what we chose to do, because we both worked really, really hard jobs. We worked long hours, and we knew that we weren't going to have the time to invest in fixing something up. But what that meant was we weren't doing a lot of our day-to-day in town, right? So how did this impact us? At one point, I remember, and it was Andre and I and our son, we decided to go and grab a bite to eat. And there was a dive diner. And we went in, and we immediately got attention. We sat down, and the attention didn't wane. The attention didn't leave us until we left the restaurant. And I felt very unsafe. I felt very visible. I felt, we need, I even considered maybe we don't even order. But I think Andre, being the person that she is, was just, we sat down, we had our dinner. I think she even noticed, which she's not all that great. But live your life. Live your life, and other people hopefully come along. Hopefully. Okay, so the one time I remember feeling very unsafe was not in Charlottesville, but I think you step outside of the ring of Charlottesville, and it can get pretty interesting quickly.
Cool. My next question would be about sort of a bit more recent, I would say, in the past, like just before COVID stuff, is like, how have you experienced like the more recent queer community?
That's an interesting question. Can we pause it for just a second?
Okay, recording started again.
Okay, so other groups that were active back in the 90s, late 90s, early aughts, there was a branch of PFLAG, PFLAG, and there was a teen group through ROSMY, which ROSMY, and it was Richmond Out. What was the S for? It was an out group for LGBT youth in Richmond that they did a branch up here in Charlottesville, and they coordinated it through the PFLAG. They used to meet in a coffee house. It was, at the time, it was the Prism Coffee House, PRISM Coffee House. It was on Rugby Avenue. It was on the second floor. And I think a person you might need to speak with for that, Julie Weed, JULIE, WEED. She's awesome. She's part of the educational community, I think at Albemarle High School, and there were GSAs, was what they called them, back in the day. I think she coordinated the GSA at Albemarle High School. And she's a friend of ours, and she also adopted a kid about the same time we adopted a kid, so they were really close there for a while. Anyway, you'd love talking to Julie, and I'm sure she'd love talking to you.
That's awesome.
I can get, if we follow up with me, I'll get you contact info.
Absolutely.
Okay, because she was one of the like informal leaders in the community. What else was I going to say about that? Just that, okay, so how about I say this? I think the gay community in Charlottesville went through a major transition when gay pride started to happen. Because prior to that, everything was very decentralized, and there were just lots of individual people doing their part and pulling a little weight. And when gay pride started to organize, they worked to try to get everything central. And you know, some of that worked very smoothly, and some of it didn't. Change can be hard. And on all fronts to try to manage. So I think a lot of those individuals didn't necessarily continue to be active in the gay community after that, but that organization became very active.
Right. I just remembered there was, pretty much until COVID, there was another teen group. I don't know if it was maybe Roseme's like continuation
Yes.
by Side by Side?
Yes, Side by Side was what became, Roseme became Side by Side.
That makes sense, yeah.
And that's what they named, and then they changed their name again, didn't they? Now that they're sharp, I don't know.
I have no clue.
Yeah, but
I know
you're
Side by Side is Richmond based,
Mm-hmm.
and I think they had to pull out of Charlottesville when COVID happened.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Right. And is there now no group?
Yeah, not really.
That's no good.
Yeah, which is why.
You're working on it.
Yep.
Good for you. Awesome.
And then I don't know if they changed their name again.
I
know
knew
there's-
I knew that there were difficulties with like there was this idea of it should be a separate thing from Richmond.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's when they came up with the Side by Side name or if it was after Side by Side that they came up with. I don't know.
Yeah, I know there is Ready Kids here. I've worked with them a little bit, but they were kind of stumbling through COVID as well.
Yeah, it wasn't everybody, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know how they're doing now.
Right.
I need to follow up with them eventually.
Yeah, it would be kind of. I would think it would be kind of cool to find the people who were doing like faculty advising for the gay groups at the local high schools, which I think
Yes.
Julie could probably help you with.
Okay. Yeah, that's absolutely.
Because I think those were essential, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, is there any like interesting stories from Tandem that might have been related to queer
History?
history?
Sure.
Any students or something?
Yeah. So when I became the college counselor at Tandem, which was, what year was that? 2008? 2007. It was the academic year 2007, 2008. There was no GSA there. I mean, it's a small school, so student activities can fluctuate depending on what the student interest is at any given time. But there wasn't a GSA. And I think it was the very next year, 08, 09, that I was out at the school. A student came to me, which was a choice. You know, I had been at the University of Virginia for 7 years, and they have a very strong non-discrimination policy, so I felt totally comfortable being out and open there.
Right.
But making a transition, I mean, I didn't know anything about the Quakers. And I'm making a transition to a Quaker, it's a religious school.
Yeah.
My very first day on the job, I put up a picture of me and my wife and my son. And it says, "Love is family," or something like that. And the upper school director walked in, who became a really good friend of mine. She was welcoming me to Tandem, and she looked at it and she said, "You know, that's totally okay here." And I had a couple of thoughts about that. I was like, oh, it's so good of her to tell me that.
Yeah.
And she felt the need to tell me that.
Yeah.
Right? So it was both.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, it's a safe place, and we have work to do. But when a student came to me the second year, and her name was Miriam, and I'll have to do some research to figure out what her last name was. She considered herself bi, I believe at the time, or maybe even not, maybe just ally. And she's like, there needs to be a GSA at Tandem. It's Tandem. You know, we're this liberal school. We don't have this. We need to make sure that this happens. And she was very dynamic and asked me if I'd be a faculty sponsor. And of course I would be a faculty sponsor.
Yeah.
And so we would meet in my office, which is a very relatively small office, and Miriam would always have a subject that we were going to discuss. And so she would stand up in front of the student body in the morning for announcements and say, you know, the GSA is meeting on Wednesday during lunch in Catherine's office, and we're going to talk about gay marriage and its status in the United States, or whatever the subject was, or parenting rights, or you know, whatever. And we had probably anywhere from between a half a dozen to a dozen students show up every week, not necessarily any of them identifying.
Right.
Right? And that's totally okay.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the point.
That's the point.
Yeah.
Right. And there was no situation in which they would need to feel like they needed to identify. So it started small, and it was, Miriam, I think, thought of it as the first GSA at Tandem, but I learned later from the upper school director that that wasn't true, that there had been a GSA, but it really did depend on student leadership.
Right.
Which
It
is
just had dropped off for a couple years
right.
or something.
So I don't know. So I know that the GSA started again and never stopped in 08, 09. It just changed names. Like they called themselves Saga. or they did by the time I left. They were calling them something. I'd change the name again because terminology changes, and the ways we view. There's this idea of you want your allies, you want the members of the community, and you want to make sure your labels don't make anybody feel left out.
Yeah.
So it is kind of funny to me that I was the faculty advisor, and I can't tell you what SAGA stood for. I think it was Straight and Gay Alliance. I think it's, and then they changed. No, it was that Straight and Gay Alliance, and then they decided those were too definitive. Yeah. So they changed it to something I can't remember. It was you could probably find if you went on their websites.
Yeah, I know the general term for that genre of club for schools is still GSA, Gay Straight Alliance. Yeah. I'm not 100%, I don't know Tandem specifically.
Tandem's weird. They like to do it their own way.
Yeah. Are you still connected with people at Tandem?
I am.
And the GSA group there?
Who would be the person to talk to? A lot of the folks that I know I know who you would talk to over there. Her name is Anne Dean, ANNE DEANE. And actually, she's an interesting person to talk to because she came to us from having worked at a very different school in town that is Christian based. And I remember us thinking at the time, or I thought at the time, we're hiring somebody from a Christian based school. Is that going to change the way our feel is? She showed up on the very first day in her car. Bumper sticker was one of the Darwin Evolve things. I was like, she's probably going to be okay. And it turns out that she was the person that at her school, if folks were struggling around their identity, she would be the person that they would go to. And it wasn't an official thing, because if it had been an official thing, it would have gotten...
Yeah, it would have been a problem.
It would have been a problem, but... And she talked about the real importance of having those people in those types of places.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? She was a safe person.
Yeah.
So then she came to Tandem, and of course she got involved with the GSA. Here's one of the things that happened at the GSA at Tandem, I have to tell you. So many people on the faculty were supportive that I had to tell people to stop showing up. Because it's like, this is a student space, right? And they, but like, I literally, like half a dozen teachers would want to show up, and I'd have 3 kids. I'm like, nope.
Yeah.
Lovely that you're here. Come say hi.
Yeah.
So I loved working in it as a person, as an employee. It's like, I love working in a place like this, where that's the case. I also found it interesting. This was that even though so we had another leader. His name was Kevin Snyder, KEVINSNYDER. When Miriam graduated, it lulled for a little while. It didn't. But Kevin came along, and he was so dynamic. He's like, I'm going to have candy at the meeting, so if you don't want to come for the conversation and just the candy, that's fine. And he just made it fun and exciting, and everybody, all these people would show up. Even when it was at its height, and there could be 20, 30 people. At one point, it was like the largest club at Tandem. I mean, there are only like 100 kids in the upper school, and 20, 30 of them are showing up for the GSA, right? Yeah. But people feeling like they could identify, like, and just be gay was not, I didn't see that a lot. I would see it, they would go off to college. Kevin did. They would go off to college and then come back. And so it was part of the evolution, is how I thought of it. But at the time, I remember thinking, are we not safe enough? Or even here, are we not safe enough that people can do that? Towards the other historical things around Tandem and the LGBT community, when we had our first, what we were aware of as a trans student, who was coming up through our middle school, there were lots of conversations on the faculty about how do we support this student, how do we make this a good environment, and I found myself, doing some education here or there around what was okay and maybe not okay, and I had to do more research because, having even been part of the gay community here in Charlottesville, the T part of that community, not very visible and not very active at all during my time, at all. Should I say that? Maybe there were 2 or 3 people who were visible in our group, out of a relatively large group. But watching an institution that grounds itself in kindness and acceptance and safety, figure out how do we do that here. it was challenging for me to watch it happen because we had things like schools and traditions, right? There was a tradition of an 8th grade dinner and dance,
Right.
and there was a very strict dress code.
Yes.
You're familiar with this kind of problem,
Like a gendered dress code.
A gendered dress code.
Yep.
And so the student's mom. The student was self-advocated fairly well, but the student's mom got involved and like, are you kidding me? You have a diversity statement on your website, and you're going to say that my child has to show up with a tie. Or no, it was the other way, with a dress. So they changed the gendered policy, and they ended up I remember there were members of the faculty who had been there for a long time, who were like, "This is how we do it," and they taught gendered behavior at the dinner. Like part of the dinner was to make sure that those students knew how, quote unquote, knew how to be in formal environments. So they would say that the guys were supposed to pull the chair out for the girls,
Right.
and all of the old gendered stuff. And so I remember that faculty member thinking, this is going to kill the dinner.
Yeah.
This is going to kill all these fabulous traditions. And, working with that person around, maybe it was time for them to die, and that, so there was this idea of honoring traditions and modifying to evolve to meet the needs of our students. So it ended up, and Andy was one of the big people involved in this, where we looked for how do we make sure that we have non-gendered bathrooms. And so she went around and she identified, we're a campus that has some kind of school-like buildings that have stalls for women and stalls for men, and boys and girls, sorry. But we were also an old school that had the big building that had been there forever, that had its own little bathrooms, right? And there were a couple of those buildings on campus. And they're like, okay, so we've identified these are single-use bathrooms. They can be our non-gendered bathrooms. This was a good step in many ways, right? Because we identified resources and labeled them and made sure that that was honored. But it was also problematic in that students, like the gym, didn't have a non-gendered bathroom.
Right.
So if that student didn't want to be in the locker room to change and wanted to be someplace separate,
You'd have to go to a different building.
They'd have to be at a different building to do that. And that was not ideal. And I don't know that they've fixed that problem yet. I know they went through all of our documents, like the documents that say father, mother, and now says parent, parent. So we degendered. Like that started the process of reflection for the institution to say, how do we do this better? And there were just ripple effects. We would run across something. Oh, we haven't dealt with that yet. Yeah, we got to deal with that. I know change comes slowly. You want it to just be, but it is kind of, I don't know. I've been in a lot of institutions, and seeing institutional change can be really hard. So at a smaller institution, I think it's easier. You can.
Do you know roughly when that started?
The non-gendered.
Yeah, when the student was there and.
It's a great question.
Started to change all that.
Dean would probably be the better person to ask.
Okay.
On the dates on that.
Okay.
But I would say, let's see, when did I leave there? I left there in 2014. No, that's not right. God, that's when I got married. Wrong date. I left there in 2022. And by the time I left there in 2022, it was kind of like a non-issue by then. Like, of course, we're good on all these things. And of course, we've degendered everything. But I would say it probably took us a good, oh God, this is going to be awful. It might have taken us a good 10 years to get there. So maybe 2012, maybe 2015, the start of that process, somewhere in there.
Okay. I'll put down 2010s.
Okay. Yeah, there you go.
Let's see. I'm curious if you had any more to say about some of the specific locations
Of some of the places?
Yeah.
Like Club 216?
Like Club 216,
So Club 216, which had previously been Lady Fox. I think Lady Fox was on Water Street, and it was, I believe, like if you're coming up from the theater, like Violet Crown. Not Violet Crown.
Vinegar Hill Theater?
No, it is the Violet Crown. When you're coming up between It's the drive-through,
Yeah.
where you can drive through the mall?
Right.
Okay, so that intersection, if the theater is on your right and the parking area is on your left, you're coming up there. My understanding is that Lady Fox was in one of the business fronts on the left before you got to the intersection.
Roughly where Revolutionary Soup is? No?
Wrong. Okay.
Wrong side?
Yeah,
Or
wrong side. So
other side of that?
instead of driving through the cross-through, think of yourself on Water Street.
Okay.
And you're moving towards the intersection with McIntyre. Not McIntyre. What's the the statue? You're heading towards where the statues are.
Right.
And now you've got that huge building up on the right. It wasn't always there. That's where Escafe was for a while. But on the left, there was a business front that had Lady Fox. When I came along in the mid to late 90s, Club 216, now I'm going to even have more difficulty saying where it is. It was kind of on the back end of that. Can I remember where they were? So you're driving down 5th Street towards the statue, coming into town, and you would take a right, not on Water Street, but there's another street that goes off to the left. I mean, to the right, so that there's a merge area. And so you'd go down there and head towards, like you're coming up to the parking area that's for Downtown Mall. Before you got to that parking area on the left, it was really industrial looking. I remember the first time Audrey took me there, it's like, this is the club. There's like this huge parking area and this like a metal staircase up the back of the building.
Right near the garage?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's right. Oh God, I'm a horrible person for asking these questions. My son is amazing with directions. Like he just internalized it from a young age. He would tell me how to go get, and before he drove.
Yeah.
Me, on the other hand, I'm just so sorry. What other place do you want to know where it is?
So Escafe was also right in that spot?
Yeah.
Let's see. Where did you all host the Share the Love Valentine's dinners? At various different restaurants?
Various restaurants,
Okay.
and many of them not here anymore. The very first place we went was a place that was on Water Street between the university and between downtown, and the building's not even there anymore. And I can't remember the name of the restaurant because it didn't last much longer than, like one of the reasons they hosted us was because it was like get the word out,
Right.
kind of thing.
Oh, so they were already on the downhill.
Yeah. So we didn't save them, unfortunately. Escafe hosted.
Escafe hosted.
A couple of times, or once or twice. It was maybe just once. And there was a place called the X Lounge. I don't know if you have ever heard of them. That was fun. They hosted more than once. There's a place down in Ix Park, an Indian restaurant down in Ix Park. I don't know if they're still there. They hosted. We've had just such great luck with places wanting to host the event and just fabulous experiences. And after a while, you'd see the same people showing up, like people from, where's the place? Yeah, people from Farmville, you know, like that would never be a part of my community, but the Share the Love dinners brought them out every year. And we did it for a long enough period of time that you would recognize these faces year after year. Here we are again, celebrating us.
It's really amazing. So we've been going for about an hour here, I believe. Do you have, I guess, here's my open, just like anything else that you're interested in saying?
Let me think about that one.
Yeah.
Anything else? I don't know, just from a personal perspective, it's just really interesting to have gone from a place where we adopted our child and had to defend that, and had to defend our family, to a place where, I don't know, my son is now grown, and I have friends whose kids are all grown, and having watched my community of friends, which are both straight and gay, having maneuvered the more openness around transgender issues, you know, like that it's part of the deal, you know, that of course you're going to talk with your kid about a spectrum and where they land on it, and of course you're going to be supportive no matter where they end up. And I mean, I know that's not everybody. I know I live in I have selected my friend group, but still, it's kind of heartwarming on one level to see it just be more part of, like, Andrea and I think of ourselves as old news, you know, you're just gay. The new edge is transgender, and that's where the work is, and that's where the acceptance needs to come, and that's where the laws need to develop, and that's the work. But to see that even in that place where that work is, how much growth there has been, how much change there's been, and I'm just really, really hoping that the current political environment doesn't kill it.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but if somebody asked me if I was scared, I would say yes.
Yeah. Right now. Yeah. I actually did just remember, I'm curious if you ever interacted with, or if there ever really was, like a drag scene in Charlottesville.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So when the clubs, so Club 216, in its old iteration, would have drag shows on the weekends, and they're always fun. They were always fun. Now, generally, I have to say that those folks were coming up from Richmond to perform, but there could be some. I think there might have been some local here or there. 216 actually made a move from downtown, and this was weird, but they moved up onto 29. Do you don't happen to know where the Asian market is?
I think I do, actually.
There's a big Asian market that's up on, like if you're going up 29, that's up off on the right. That's kind of separate. But there's a little Asian market if you're coming from the Barracks Road area, where Zaxby's is on the right.
Oh, okay.
And if you look on the left, somewhere over there, and again, my directions, but somewhere over there, you'll see this little Asian market. It has a second story. That second story became 216.
Wow.
Because what happened, I mean, I can see on your face, like, there was a really cool downtown location. It was large, and it was established, and people knew where it was. But somehow the management of it didn't work.
Yeah, I imagine it also got expensive to have a spot there.
Probably, yeah. And so I remember Andre got involved in trying to salvage, and like, it might have been to wrap it up. It might have been to recreate, like, how are we going to get from this place to something else?
Right.
And what ended up happening, they ended up with new owners and a new structure and a new location. But they still called it Club 216. So it was kind of a whole new deal. And we went there a couple of times, and they had drag shows, and there was a pool table, and there was, which hadn't been, mostly 216 had been a dance club, but this was a bar, it was a pool, they had the pool tables, they had the drag shows, and again, I think a lot of them did come up from Richmond.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's amazing. Let's see, do I have anything else I'm interested in? But yeah, I think that's it for now.
Okay.
In terms of what I wanted recorded.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's fun to talk about.
Yeah, this has been wonderful. And goodbye to whoever's listening to this.
Thank you.